Colin's Last Stand needs your help. If you like what CLS does, whether here on SideQuest, in the eclectic interview podcast series Fireside Chats, or the retro and nostalgia-fueled show Knockback, please consider showing your support at patreon.com/ColinsLastStand. Doing so not only ensures that CLS keeps making content, but it also gets you cool perks, including exclusive podcasts, early access to shows, the ability to vote on show topics, and much more. Thank you for your kindness, generosity, and support. Without you, Colin's Last Stand cannot and will not exist. Now, on to the show. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Colin's Last Stand SideQuest right here on YouTube. My name is Colin Moriarty. As always, I hope today's video finds you and yours very well. Today, I'm taking a topic that was suggested to me by patrons over at patreon.com/ColinsLastStand. As you probably know, if you support the show and other CLS shows on Patreon at the $2 and up level per month, you get to vote in two elections per month, two-part elections, I should say, that determine topics for this show, as well as the retro and nostalgia podcast I do with my brother called Knockback. And this topic chosen was actually to discuss the most underrated and overrated games of the last decade, the last 10 years. Now, I think that the overrated topic, or the overrated part of the topic, is a little mean-spirited, and I don't want to do that. Instead, I want to focus on the underrated games of the last decade that I feel like got short shrift, were ignored, or, deserved more love, I guess I should say. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy the list, and I will see you on the other side. Oh, these are in alphabetical order, by the way. Number 1, Dead Nation. There are few developers I love as much as Housemarque, the uncontested masters of the twin-stick shooter. It's an obscure niche to occupy, sure, but Housemarque benefited from a decades-long relationship with PlayStation that bore incredible fruit, including with the astonishingly good Super Stardust series, and the best launch game in Sony's history with Resogun. But those games are recognized for their greatness. Dead Nation, launched on PS3 in 2010 and later ported to PS4 and Vita, hasn't gotten nearly as much love. And that's a shame, because Dead Nation perfectly balances depth and gameplay to make it perhaps Housemarque's stickiest game. And that's really saying something, because Housemarque thrives in that addictive gameplay/high score cycle. Dead Nation is about high score chasing, sure, but so is Stardust, Resogun, and even newer Housemarque offerings like Alien Nation, Nex Machina, and Matterfall. The thing is, games like Alien Nation got lost in the weeds with unnecessary bells and whistles. Dead Nation, on the other hand, strayed just far enough from the path to get me interested and keep me hooked, giving me the ability to upgrade and customize my arsenal and armor, hiding collectibles and hidden perks in the environment, scaling the difficulty perfectly, and allowing it all to be played solo or with a friend. Sure, it's about killing zombies, which couldn't get any more trite at this point in time, but it all just works. And the DLC is pretty awesome too, even if it's a bummer that said DLC is the closest we ever got to getting any sort of sequel. Number 2, Foul Play. With so much launching week in and week out, you're going to miss out on games you'd probably really like if only you knew they existed, or had the money to buy them, or even could just find the time to play them. So when I randomly found and started playing Foul Play, an old school style brawler by British studio Mediatonic, I had zero expectation that anyone who looked to me for my gaming perspective was enjoying it too. And hell, I too missed it the first time around, as it was originally launched on PC and Xbox 360 in 2013. When it came to Vita in 2016 though, I jumped on in, and I'm so glad I did. Not only is Foul Play a pleasure to, play, it's also super novel in its delivery, and focuses on a genre that's pretty much dead today. If you're unfamiliar with what a brawler is, some people call them beat-em-ups, they were popular in the late 80s into the 90s. Think Double Dragon, the TMNT or Simpsons arcade titles, or Final Fight. Foul Play is a game that fits with these historic games, but it adds new layers pretty much never seen in the genre: story, personality, and an interesting gimmick. The entire game takes place on stage in front of an audience. By doing well, bashing baddies, keeping your combo high, and avoiding damage, the audience remains impressed and on your side. But if you start playing badly, the audience turns on you, and if you really piss them off, it's game over. Foul Play's mechanics are deep, and it's a long and difficult game too, with perks and challenges keeping things fresh. It's a truly delightful adventure, one too few people paid attention to, no less played. I think you should change that. Number 3, Headlander. Whether you like Double Fine Productions or don't care for them all that much, you have to at least respect what they do. This is a studio found at the turn of the century that is always trying something new and different. It's hard to believe that they made Psychonauts, and Brutal Legend, and Costume Quest, and Stacking, and The Cave, and Broken Age, and Massive Chalice, and on and on. Talk about eclectic. Well, you can add Headlander to that list, my favorite Double Fine game. Yes, even more than you, Costume Quest. Representing yet another new and interesting direction for the San Francisco-based studio to run in. What is Headlander, you ask? Why, it's a side-scrolling Metroidvania game where you control a floating head, and it's a blast to play. What more could you possibly ask for? The fact is, Headlander deserved much more love and much more attention than it got. From my perspective, the Metroidvania genre has never been as well represented and robust as it could and certainly should be. And Headlander not only put a new and different spin on it with its bizarre retro sci-fi setting, its baked-in humor, and its shockingly rewarding puzzles, but it was polished and complete. When I beat it, I didn't feel like I was wanting for any more. The difficulty was perfect, as was the game length. I was sad when it was over, but I felt satiated, which is kinda rare, right? And I was sadder yet that so few people seem to be playing it. Alas, if only more people understood how fun it is to occupy bodies with a sentient head. Maybe one day. Number 4, I Am Setsuna. When Square Enix founded upstart Japanese developer Tokyo RPG Factory, their directive from home base was clear. Make a JRPG in the old style, something that looks and feels like it's from another gaming generation. And boy oh boy did they deliver. When I Am Setsuna launched in the West in 2016, it did so with some fanfare, specifically from people like me who long for the glory days of the Japanese role-playing game. But it also didn't catch the imagination of the wider mainstream gaming consciousness, and that's a damn shame, because I Am Setsuna hit all the right notes for me, including musical notes at that. I Am Setsuna's soundtrack is one of my favorite gaming soundtracks possibly ever, and added a great deal to its world's mystique. I Am Setsuna focuses on sadness. It's unabashedly melancholy, and certainly not for those seeking an uplifting message, a bright, colorful world, an upbeat soundtrack, or a happy and talkative cast of characters. But all of that is why I Am Setsuna is so unbelievably unique and charming. Its blizzardy setting and its dour characters represent such a stark contrast to the bubbly and vivid nature of so many JRPGs, and its gameplay is so simple and old school, yet rewarding. See, I Am Setsuna is all about fusing familiarity with a dissonant message, a tough tightrope to walk. But Tokyo RPG Factory should be proud of what it accomplished, giving players a nostalgic and heart-wrenching story about a girl willing to sacrifice herself for the greater good. A selfless message all too rare in video games, old or new. Number 5, Killzone Mercenary. PlayStation Vita had so much untapped potential, and though it's still limping around 2018's gaming scene on a ratty old crutch, even those of us most evangelical about it over the years understand that its heyday is long behind it, and that all it could have been is becoming a distant memory. But back in 2013, when Killzone Mercenary launched on the handheld, a better reality for Vita was still within grasp, and this was one of the games that showed what Vita could have and perhaps should have been, the home of truly AAA portable romps that simply wouldn't have been possible on earlier handheld hardware. Taking advantage of Vita's twin sticks in ways most other games didn't, Killzone Mercenary is very easily Vita's best first-person shooter, and arguably its most pristine console-level package alongside Uncharted Golden Abyss. Delivered not by Guerrilla Games, but by its now-defunct Guerrilla Cambridge cousin, Mercenary was a beautifully realized FPS on a handheld thirsty for the genre, especially after 2012 gave Vita players Resistance Burning Skies and Call of Duty Black Ops Declassified, both awful games that undoubtedly helped contribute to Vita's demise. With hindsight, it's easy to see that Mercenary simply came too late, but at the time, we were thrilled. Not only was there an awesome, albeit short campaign here, but there was multiplayer and lots of layers to the different modes that intersected with each other brilliantly. As the name suggests, it all hinges on money, and you earn in-game currency for pretty much everything you do. Allowing you to work both sides of Killzone's simmering games-long conflict was a novel and interesting approach, but ultimately, Mercenary was quickly, and sadly, forgotten. Number 6, Mad Max. People made fun of me when Mad Max came out because I couldn't stop talking about how awesome it was, and it seemed like no one believed me. But slowly, over the last 2.5 years or so since the game launched, I've gotten more and more tweets and other messages letting me know I was right. See, the reason so many people didn't give Avalanche's open-world Mad Max game the attention it deserved was because of timing. It came out the same exact day as Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain, and obviously that was a gigantic, predictable error on behalf of WB, Mad Max's publisher. But timing be damned. Mad Max shined bright for me when it came out, and it did so for some weird reasons too, like giving players a truly decrepit, sparsely populated world most reminiscent of what the post-apocalypse might actually be like. I think the greatest thing about Mad Max was the driving though, and how wonderfully it intermingled with the game's core combat, exploring its vast world, and seeing everything the wide open desert had in store, if only you were willing to put in the time and effort necessary. I especially loved the collectibles from the pre-apocalyptic world, pictures and notes that offered glimpses into better yet increasingly chaotic times. There was a timbre to the entire package that struck a chord with me, but on a beat-by-beat basis, it was a blast to play too, following the collectathon and territory-obsessed mantra made famous by the likes of Ubisoft, but before we were starting to get tired of it, coupled with Arkham-like combat that rounded everything out nicely. Number 7, Severed. I have this random memory of going to GDC a year or so after Vita launched and attending a Vita-centric panel. Sitting on the panel was a representative from Drinkbox Studios, the Canadian developer that found success with its Vita launch game Tales from Space: Mutant Blobs Attack. And the representative noted how with a tiny but ravenous fanbase, you can sell games and make money. And he meant it. A couple of years later, Drinkbox launched the amazing Guacamelee on Vita and elsewhere, and then in 2016, they did the unthinkable. They launched what was at the time a Vita exclusive game. It was called Severed, and it was amazing. It was also a major gamble, and an awesome example of a studio showing faith in an audience that, in turn, allowed them to exist and to thrive. And hey, it all worked out great. Severed is a first-person dungeon-crawling RPG that can be 100%ed in fewer than a dozen hours, and indeed that's one of its charms, because not everything needs to steal 100 hours of my life. Toting an identical art style as the aforementioned Guacamelee, but straying a great deal from the Metroidvania genre, Severed instead forced players to use touch controls, literally severing body parts from enemies as you traverse the game. Severed was so late to Vita that lots of people undoubtedly missed it, but there's good news. These days you can also play it on Wii U, 3DS, and Switch, so it's more accessible than ever. Short by RPG standards, a joy to play mechanically, stunning in its aesthetic, and surprisingly stoic in its darkness and sadness, Severed deserves more love, more praise, and more players too. Number 8, Spec Ops the Line. I've gone on and on and on about Spec Ops the Line over the years, but with the CLS audience asking for a video like this, it simply had to make another appearance. Spec Ops the Line is a third-person shooter launched in 2012, developed by German studio Jaeger. Now, you shouldn't let its terrible name fool you. The fact that publisher 2K was stupid enough to let the game be called this is a tragedy, because it turned off legions of people that would have otherwise found one of the most thought-provoking, thematically challenging, and outright provocative video games ever conceived. A shooter that seems a great deal like any other at first glance, but one that challenges players in ways few, if any, games ever had before. Without spoiling anything, Spec Ops the Line focuses on a small team of soldiers entering a near-future Dubai that has been obliterated by natural disasters, and occupied ever since by seemingly nefarious forces. But in reality, the game is about mental illness and the horrific nature of warfare, and forces players to do some pretty bad stuff. Remember that in 2012, we were in the midst of being crushed by a lot of gimmicky shooters, so to play something like this was a true mindbender, delivered at the most crucial time possible. It doesn't hurt that it's an absolute blast to play, of course, but in reality, Spec Ops The Line revolves entirely around that story and those characters. I truly feel it's a must-play for any serious gamer. Number 9, 3/4 Home. Like many gamers, I love to find adventures that take dozens and sometimes even scores of hours to complete in their entirety. But every once in a while, a bite-sized game comes along that can be beaten in only an hour or two, and acts as a wonderful palate cleanser in between games that sometimes feel like full-time jobs to see all the way through. This is the beautiful space between that 3/4 Home exists in, a short, story-driven adventure game launched in early 2015 on various platforms. The entire game revolves around a character named Kelly, a 20-something from Nebraska who is driving home to be with her family. The game itself is essentially a phone conversation between Kelly and her family. Now, I know that for some players, games like this simply don't speak to you, and that's fine. But these kinds of games do speak to me, just like Gone Home and The Unfinished Swan spoke to me in their emotion, in their storytelling, and in their inherent uniqueness. For such a short game, one that requires you to make conversation choices as you roll on through, 3/4 Home packs an incredible and unforgettable emotional punch, especially with its parallel, optional scene that fills in a lot of really important plot. 3/4 Home is cheap, it's on most major platforms, and you should take the time necessary to experience it for yourself. Just think about it. What's the downside to keeping an open mind and giving it a go? Worst comes to worst, you're out a few bucks and an hour or two at most. Number 10, Velocity Ultra. In 2012, British studio Future Lab quietly launched a PSP game under the PlayStation Mini moniker called Velocity, but it wasn't until the next year, when Future Lab brought an updated version of Velocity to Vita under the title Velocity Ultra, that I was made aware of their game. Thereafter, I was immediately riveted by it and addicted to it. Velocity Ultra is a vertically scrolling space shooter where speed and efficiency rule. By using your ship's guns, as well as some amazing powers of teleportation, players are challenged to get through each level in the game as quickly and as completely as possible. The latter is especially important, as earning perfect scores requires not only haste, but haste while killing every enemy, grabbing every collectible, and avoiding any damage. If it sounds challenging, it's because it is, and that's what hooked me from the get-go. Of course, you may recall that Velocity Ultra ended up getting a sequel in 2014 called Velocity 2X, and while that was an awesome game in its own right, it lost a little bit of the sheen the original had, in that it threw in traditional side-scrolling and platforming portions that, for me, broke up the pinpoint rhythm so essential to the original success. Either way, though, too few people played Velocity Ultra, and I'd love to encourage you to give it a go, especially if you're a high-score, completionist, or S-rank junkie. If you are, this game is right up your alley, and if not, who knows? Maybe the pixel-perfect gameplay alone will encourage you to give it a try. Mix it all together, and you have a really special concoction that was criminally overlooked. Alright, that's it for this episode of SideQuest. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, leave your comments below. I'll be reading them. Thumb up the video if you liked it. Thumb it down if you didn't. And of course, share the majesty, the might, and the wonder of Colin's Last Stand, CLS Prime, SideQuest, Fireside Chats, and Knockback with friends, family, etc. It really does help spread the word. I will waste no more of your time, but I do appreciate the time you did give me today. I hope you and yours are doing fantastic, and I will see you next time for more SideQuest. Until then, keep on gaming.